The night Mei Lin Zhao refused to become property, she stole a dying horse and rode straight into hell. Most girls would have cried, begged, accepted the cage her stepfather built with his gambling debts and Silas Crow's blood money. But Mei Lin had learned something in 19 years of swallowing silence. Sometimes the only way out is through the fire. This is a story about a woman who chose the desert over chains, bullets over surrender, and discovered that freedom isn't given, it's taken. Stay with me until the end. Like and comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The smell hit first. Whiskey, tobacco, and her stepfather's particular brand of desperation. Mei Lin pressed herself against the thin wall, separating her cramped room from the kitchen, listening to voices she'd learned to fear. She's a good girl, obedient, young. Her stepfather's Cantonese carried that wheedling tone he used when the gambling debts piled too high. I don't need good. The responding voice was pure gravel, English thick with Western arrogance. Silas Crow. Even his name tasted like rust. I need a wife who won't ask questions and a Chinaman who'll disappear from my ledger. Mei Lin's fingers curled against the rough wood. She'd seen Crow once, riding through Ash Hollow's dusty main street like he owned it, which, in most ways that mattered, he did. 50-something years of hard living carved into a face that had forgotten kindness. Men like him didn't take wives, they collected them. $3,000 erased, her stepfather said. And she comes with a dowry, small but respectable. The dowry was her mother's jade bracelet, the only thing Mei Lin had left of a woman who died bringing her to this godforsaken country. Her mother had believed in America's promises, had believed her new husband would protect her daughter after she was gone. Beliefs, Mei Lin had learned, were expensive luxuries. Done. Crow's boots struck the floorboards. I'll send my men Saturday. She better be ready. Saturday. 3 days. Mei Lin waited until the door slammed, until her stepfather's uneven footsteps retreated to his room, until the house settled into the creaking silence of a place where hope went to die. Then she moved. Her belongings fit in one worn satchel, 2 dresses, her mother's bracelet wrapped in cloth, a small knife better suited for vegetables than defense, and the $17 she'd saved from 2 years of washing laundry for the general store. Not enough to buy passage anywhere that mattered. Barely enough to buy time. The mare in the lean-to was older than Mei Lin, half blind, with a temperament that matched her stepfather's on bad days. Nobody would miss her. Nobody would miss Mei Lin either, except as a transaction that fell through. She worked in the dark, fingers steady, despite the fear turning her stomach to water. Saddle. Blanket. Her mother had taught her to ride back in Guangdong, before the failed crops and false promises that dragged them across an ocean. The mare snorted, suspicious. I know, Mei Lin whispered in Cantonese. I'm scared too. The desert stretched beyond Ash Hollow like a living threat, empty miles of sage and sand and things that killed without malice, simply because that's what the desert did. People died out there, disappeared into dust and became cautionary tales mothers told daughters about staying put, staying safe, staying owned. Mei Lin checked the canteen twice, filled it from the well, added her stepfather's half bottle of cheap whiskey for good measure. Not enough water. Never enough water. But she'd read somewhere that the desperate made better choices than the comfortable, because the desperate had nothing left to lose. That was a lie, she knew. The desperate had everything to lose. They just chose the loss they could live with. She led the mare past the house, past the neighboring shacks where Chinese workers slept in shifts, past the boundary where Ash Hollow's illusion of civilization gave way to raw truth. The night smelled like creosote and distant rain that would never fall. Stars packed the sky so thick they looked like spilled salt. Her stepfather would wake to find her gone. Would he report it? Doubtful. Reporting meant admitting he'd lost control of property he'd already sold. Crow would send men, though, men who knew the desert, who tracked runaway wives the way other people tracked lost cattle. The thought should have stopped her, should have turned her around, sent her crawling back to accept the inevitable. Instead, it made her dig her heels into the mare's flanks. They moved through darkness that felt less like absence and more like possibility. Mei Lin had no plan beyond forward, no destination except away. The old mission road ran southeast, toward settlements too small to have names, toward the kind of nowhere where a Chinese girl might disappear into useful anonymity, or die trying. The mare's gait was uneven, favoring her left foreleg. They'd make maybe 15 miles before dawn if luck held. Luck never held. Dawn came anyway, brutal and indifferent. The sun rose like an accusation, turning the desert into a vast griddle of sand and scrub. Mei Lin's water was already half gone. The mare's breathing came labored. They'd covered maybe 10 miles, and the landscape looked exactly the same in all directions, hostile, empty, infinite. She'd made a mistake. The realization sat in her chest like a stone. This wasn't freedom, it was just a different way to die. But she kept riding. Noon hit like a fist. The mare stumbled, caught herself, stumbled again. Mei Lin slid off, legs shaking, and walked beside the animal because forcing her to carry weight felt cruel. They were both dying out here. At least they could do it honestly. The canteen was nearly empty. Mei Lin allowed herself one small sip, let the water sit in her mouth before swallowing. The whiskey she left alone. Drinking it would feel like giving up. She scanned the horizon for anything, a canyon, an outcropping, a shadow that might mean water. Nothing, just heat shimmer and the kind of silence that made you hear your own heartbeat too loud. The mare stopped walking. "Come on." Mei Lin tugged the reins. "Please." The animal's head drooped, old, half-blind, and now dying because Mei Lin had been stupid enough to think she could outrun the world with no supplies and less sense. "I'm sorry," Mei Lin said, and meant it. "I'm so sorry." She sat in the dirt beside the mare, beneath sun that wanted them both dead. Maybe this was fair. Maybe girls who ran deserved what they got. Maybe... The sound came from her left. Hoofbeats. Mei Lin's hand went to the knife at her belt. Inadequate, pathetic, but something. She stood, squinting against the glare, watching a rider materialize from heat, shimmer into solid reality. Not Crow's men. Wrong direction, wrong bearing. Single rider on a roan gelding that looked built for distance. The man sat his saddle like someone who'd forgotten how to do anything else, hat pulled low, rifle visible across his lap. He reined up 20 feet away, assessing. Mei Lin kept her hand on the knife. "You lost?" His voice carried the kind of roughness that came from disuse, not cruelty. "No." The lie tasted like copper. He looked at her, Chinese girl in a dirty dress, dying horse, empty desert in all directions, and something that might have been amusement flickered across his face. Not mockery, just recognition of a particularly stupid brand of bravery. "Where you headed?" Mei Lin lifted her chin. "Away." "Away's a big place. You got water for getting there?" She didn't answer. He already knew. The rider dismounted, moved with the careful economy of someone who'd learned not to waste energy. Up close, he looked harder than the desert, maybe 30, with eyes that had seen things that didn't wash off, and a jaw that could have been carved from the same rock as the surrounding cliffs. 3 days of stubble, trail dust coating him like a second skin, and a wariness that matched her own. "Name's Rafe." He pulled a canteen from his saddle, held it out. Mei Lin didn't take it. "Why?" "Why what?" "Why help me?" Rafe studied her for a long moment. "Lady, I got no idea why you're out here dying for no good reason, and I don't particularly care, but I've seen enough dead things in my life. Rather not add to the count if it's avoidable." He set the canteen in the dirt between them and stepped back, hands visible, non-threatening. The gesture felt deliberate, calculated to put her at ease. "I don't need charity," Mei Lin said. "Then call it a loan. You live long enough to find water. We're square." The canteen sat there, sweating in the heat. Pride was another luxury she couldn't afford. Mei Lin picked it up. The water tasted like tin and salvation. She forced herself to stop after 3 swallows, her body screaming for more. Rafe was checking her mare, hands gentle on the animal's leg. "She's done. You push her any further, she'll die under you." "I know." "You got money for another horse?" Mei Lin thought of her $17. "No." "Then you got a problem." He straightened, looked at her with something that might have been respect. "You running from law or from a man?" "Does it matter?" "Might. Law gives up after a while. Men don't." He paused. "Especially if there's pride involved." Maylin thought of Silas Crow's voice in her stepfather's kitchen, casual as buying livestock. A man. Rafe nodded like this confirmed something. Husband? Not yet. Ah. He pulled his hat off, wiped sweat from his forehead. Let me guess. Arrangement you didn't arrange? Maylin said nothing. Silence was safer than details. Well, Rafe settled his hat back. Your business is your business, but you keep going the way you're headed, you'll be dead by nightfall. Desert doesn't give a damn about your reasons. What do you suggest? He looked southeast, where the mission road supposedly led to somewhere less deadly. There's a way station about 30 miles out, run by a Mexican woman, doesn't ask questions if you don't cause trouble. You could rest there, figure out your next move. On what horse? That's the second problem. Rafe walked back to his gelding, untied a rolled blanket from behind his saddle. You can ride double with me to the station. After that, you're on your own. Maylin's hand tightened on the knife. Why would you do that? Already told you, I don't like counting bodies. You don't know me. Don't need to. He met her eyes, and Maylin saw something there she recognized. The look of someone who'd learned the hard way that the world didn't organize itself around fair. Everyone's running from something. Some run faster than others. You ran straight into the goddamn desert with no plan and a horse that's older than dirt. That takes either courage or stupidity, and I got a feeling you're not stupid. The mare made a sound low in her throat, legs trembling. Maylin went to her, pressed her forehead against the animal's neck. I'm sorry, she whispered again. Rafe gave them space. When Maylin looked up, he was checking his rifle, politely not watching her cry. Can't take her, he said quietly. She won't make it, and trying would just hurt her more. Maylin knew, had known since the mare stumbled the first time, but knowing and accepting were different countries. You know how to do it quick? Rafe asked. She shook her head. Then let me. It wasn't charity. It was mercy, which was something else entirely. Maylin stepped back, and Rafe led the mare a short distance away. She didn't watch, but she heard the single shot echo across the emptiness, final as a closed door. When Rafe came back, he didn't say anything, just held out his hand to help her mount the gelding. Maylin ignored it, pulled herself up on her own. He swung up behind her, careful not to touch more than necessary. They rode in silence. The sun tracked west, turning the sky into a furnace. Maylin felt every mile in her bones, felt the presence of the stranger at her back, felt the weight of choices she couldn't take back. You got a name? Rafe asked eventually. Maylin. That Chinese? Yes. You speak English pretty good. My mother insisted. Had drilled her in both languages, convinced that fluency would open doors. Instead, it had just meant Maylin understood perfectly when men talked about her like she wasn't there. She still around? Your mother? No, Rafe didn't push. They rode through afternoon heat that made the air shimmer like water, through shadows that stretched long and accusatory. Maylin's head felt heavy, her body swaying with the gelding's rhythm. At some point, she caught herself leaning back against Rafe's chest. She jerked upright. Falling asleep won't kill you, he said. Falling off the horse might. I'm fine. Sure you are. But she wasn't. The adrenaline that had carried her through the night was gone, leaving behind exhaustion so deep it felt like drowning. Her eyes kept closing despite her best efforts. How much farther? She managed. 10 miles. Maybe 12. An eternity. Maylin tried to focus on staying conscious, staying upright, staying something other than a burden to a stranger who had no reason to help her except some private code she didn't understand. You're not going to make it, Rafe said, matter of fact. Not sitting up like that. I'll manage. Pride's going to break your neck. His arm came around her waist, solid and impersonal. Lean back. I'll make sure you don't fall. Every instinct screamed not to trust him. Men didn't help women for free. There was always a price, always an angle. But Maylin was so tired, and the desert didn't care about her suspicions. She leaned back. Rafe smelled like sweat and leather and something else she couldn't name. Maybe just the particular scent of someone who'd spent too long in wild places. His heartbeat was steady against her spine. She tried to stay alert, but consciousness felt like sand slipping through her fingers. What are you running from? She heard herself ask. Rafe was quiet long enough that she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, same thing you are. Different name for it, maybe. But same thing. What thing? The part of the past that won't let you go. Maylin's eyes drifted closed. And does running work? Not so far, but I keep trying. She meant to ask more, meant to stay awake, meant to maintain the careful distance that kept people safe from each other. Instead, she fell asleep in the arms of a stranger whose last name she didn't know, riding toward a destination that might or might not exist, fleeing a fate she couldn't quite escape. The sun was setting when she woke. The sky had turned the color of old bruises, purple and gold and bleeding red. Rafe had stopped the horse near an outcropping of rock that provided minimal shade. "Welcome back," he said. Maylin straightened, putting distance between them. "Why'd we stop?" "Because you needed rest and the horse needed water." He gestured to a small depression in the rock where maybe a gallon of rainwater had collected. Ancient, probably brackish, but liquid. "Not much, but it'll do." While the gelding drank, Rafe pulled out strips of dried meat and hard biscuits that looked like they'd survived a war. He offered half to Maylin. "I can't pay you back," she said. "Didn't ask you to." She took the food. Pride was one thing, starvation was another. The meat was tough as saddle leather and tasted like salt and smoke. It was the best thing she'd ever eaten. They ate in silence, watching the desert transform under fading light. Creatures emerged, a jackrabbit, something that might have been a fox, the distant silhouette of a hawk returning to its nest. The desert wasn't empty, it was just patient. "The man you're running from," Rafe said. "He the type to send people after you?" Maylin thought of Silas Crow, his casual certainty, his assumption that she was already his. "Yes." "How many people?" "I don't know." "Enough." Rafe nodded, absorbing this. "They'll check the mission road first. It's the obvious route." "I didn't know there were other routes." "There's always other routes. Question is whether you're willing to take them." He looked at her. "The way station I mentioned, it's safe enough for a night, maybe two. But if Crow's men are looking, they'll find you eventually. Place like that only has so many exits." "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting you need a plan that goes beyond a way." He pulled out a piece of charcoal and a scrap of cloth, started sketching. "Mission Road runs southeast to the border. That's 60 miles through country Crow probably knows better than his own face. You got money?" $17. Rafe's expression said what he thought of $17. "That'll get you maybe 2 weeks if you're careful. Then what?" "I'll find work." "Doing what? You got skills besides being sold off to land barons?" The question should have stung. Instead, it just clarified the problem. Maylin could read, write, speak 2 languages, and wash laundry clean enough to satisfy the general store, none of which added up to survival. "I learn fast," she said. Something like approval crossed Rafe's face. "That's something, at least." He finished his sketch. Rough lines indicating terrain, water sources, settlements. "There's another option. Head west instead of southeast. Rougher country, but less predictable. Town called Serpent's Creek about 40 miles out. Mining town mostly. They don't ask questions if you work hard." "And you know this how?" Rafe folded the cloth, handed it to her. "I know lots of things I wish I didn't." Before Maylin could ask what that meant, he stood. "We should move. Got maybe 2 hours of light left, and I'd rather not be sitting still when it's gone." They rode through twilight and into darkness, guided by stars so bright they cast shadows. Rafe seemed to navigate by instinct, following contours in the land Maylin couldn't see. She didn't sleep this time, too aware of the gun at his hip, the knife at her belt, the fact that she was trusting a stranger because she had no other choice. "Why are you helping me?" she asked again. "You asking because you don't trust the answer or because you don't trust me?" "Both." Rafe was quiet for a moment. "Fair enough. Truth is, I don't have a good reason. Maybe I'm tired of watching people get crushed. Maybe I see something in you that reminds me of someone I failed before. Or maybe I'm just killing time until my own past catches up." He paused. "Does the reason matter if the help's real?" Maylin considered this. "I suppose not." "Then let's leave it at that." They reached the way station near midnight, a low adobe building that looked like it had grown from the desert itself, weathered and permanent. Lamplight showed through one window. A dog barked once, then went quiet. Rafe dismounted, helped Maylin down. Her legs nearly gave out when her feet hit ground. "Easy." His hand steadied her. You've been riding for hours. The door opened before they could knock. A woman stood backlit by lantern light, maybe 50, with iron gray hair and eyes that assessed them both in a single glance. "Rafe Callahan," she said, unsurprised. "Didn't expect to see you again." "Hello, Rosa." Rosa's gaze shifted to Mei Lin. "And you brought a girl. This should be interesting." "She needs a place for the night, maybe two. No questions." "That's what they all say." But Rosa stepped back, letting them in. "You know my rules." "I know them." The interior was sparse but clean. A main room with a cooking area, a table, chairs that had seen better decades. Doorways led to what Mei Lin assumed were sleeping quarters. The smell of beans and cornbread hung in the air, making her stomach cramp with hunger. Rosa pointed Mei Lin toward a bench. "Sit before you fall. You look half dead." Mei Lin sat. Rosa brought water, then a bowl of beans that was probably meant for tomorrow's breakfast. Mei Lin ate slowly, forcing herself not to gulp, while Rafe and Rosa talked in low voices by the door. "Crow's men asking questions in Ash Hollow," Rosa was saying. "Chinese girl, sold bride, ran 3 days ago. She's here now. That's all that matters. To you, maybe. But I run a business, Rafe. Can't afford the kind of attention that girl brings." 2 days, Rafe said. "Then she's gone." Rosa looked at Mei Lin, then back at Rafe. "You getting soft in your old age?" "Probably. That'll get you killed." "Most things will." Rafe dropped a few coins on the table. "This cover her board?" Rosa counted the money, nodded. 2 days. After that, she's someone else's problem. Rafe turned to Mei Lin. "You'll be safe here. Rosa's place is neutral ground. Most people respect that." "Most people," Mei Lin repeated. "Yeah, most." He headed for the door. "You're leaving?" The question came out sharper than she intended. Rafe paused. "I brought you somewhere safe. That's what I said I'd do." "And now?" "Now I go back to running from my own problems." Mei Lin stood, legs steadier now. "Thank you. For the water, the ride, all of it." "Don't thank me yet. You're not clear of this." But he nodded, almost smiled. "You got more spine than sense, Mei Lin. In this country, that might be enough." Then he was gone, the door closing behind him, hoofbeats fading into darkness. Rosa locked the door, checked the windows. "He's right, you got backbone. Stupid backbone, but backbone." She gestured toward a doorway. "Room's through there. Mattress is thin, but it's clean. You stay quiet, stay inside, and maybe you'll live to regret your choices like the rest of us." The room was barely bigger than a closet, with a narrow bed and a single window covered by oiled cloth. Mei Lin collapsed onto the mattress, still wearing her dirty dress, and stared at the ceiling. She'd escaped, made it farther than she'd had any right to expect. But Rafe's words echoed in her head. "You're not clear of this." 3 days since she'd fled Ash Hollow. 3 days Silas Crow had known she was gone. 3 days for anger to curdle into something worse. Men like Crow didn't let property walk away. Mei Lin closed her eyes and tried not to think about what came next. But sleep, when it finally came, brought dreams of dust and gunfire and a reckoning she couldn't outrun forever. Because freedom, she was learning, wasn't about running away. It was about deciding what you'd fight for when running stopped working. And Mei Lin Zhao, 19 years old and owned by no one, was just beginning to understand the difference. Dawn came too early, dragging Mei Lin from sleep that felt more like unconsciousness. Her body ached in places she didn't know could hurt, muscles screaming from a day in the saddle, sunburn tight across her cheeks, blisters on her feet from walking beside a dying horse. The room smelled like dust and old wood. Outside, roosters announced the morning like it was personal news. Rosa was already up, working at the stove when Mei Lin emerged. The older woman glanced over, assessing. "Coffee's on the table. Eggs in a minute." Mei Lin poured herself a cup from the battered pot, the brew so strong it could probably strip paint. She sat at the scarred wooden table, watching Rosa move with the efficiency of someone who'd learned not to waste motion. "How long you planning to stay?" Rosa asked, cracking eggs into a skillet. Rafe said 2 days. "Rafe says lots of things. I'm asking what you're planning." Mei Lin wrapped her hands around the coffee cup, feeling the heat seep into her palms. "I don't know yet." "Then you better figure it out fast. This place is safe until it isn't, and with Crow's men asking questions, the isn't part's coming up quick." The eggs hit plates with a wet sound. Rosa set one in front of Mei Lin, then sat across from her with her own breakfast. "You know who I'm running from," Mei Lin said. It wasn't a question. Hard not to. Silas Crow's the kind of man who makes sure everyone knows his business. Owns half the territory between here and the border, bought the other half with threats. Rosa shoveled eggs into her mouth, chewed, swallowed. "You must have done something impressive to make him mad enough to send riders out." "I existed. He wanted to own me." I disagreed. Disagreed? Rosa almost smiled. That's one word for running into the desert to die. "I didn't die." "Not yet." Rosa stood, cleared the plates. "But you're not thinking straight if you believe 2 days here solves your problem. Crow doesn't forget, doesn't forgive. You embarrassed him, and men like that, they'd rather burn the world than let that stand." Mei Lin knew this. Had known it when she first ran, but hearing it stated so plainly made it real in a way fear hadn't. "So what do I do?" Rosa turned, leaning against the counter. "You got 3 choices the way I see it. 1, you keep running, head to Mexico, change your name, hope distance makes you forgettable. 2, you find somewhere to hole up and pray Crow gets bored or dies before he finds you. 3, she paused. 3, you learn to stop being prey." "How do I do that?" "By becoming something else." Rosa's eyes were flat, certain. "This country doesn't respect soft. You want to survive out here, you need to get hard. Learn to shoot, fight, think like the men hunting you. Otherwise, you're just delaying the inevitable." Mei Lin thought about the small knife at her belt, inadequate against anything more dangerous than vegetables. Thought about her $17 and complete lack of skills that translated to frontier survival. "I don't know how to shoot." "Then learn. Find someone who does, and make them teach you." "Like who?" Rosa shrugged. "Rafe would, if you could find him again. Man's got nothing but time and bad memories. Or you could ask around Serpent's Creek, see if anyone's willing to trade lessons for work." She dried her hands on a rag. "Point is, staying helpless gets you killed. And you didn't run into the desert just to die slow somewhere else." The word sat heavy in the room. Outside, the day was heating up. She could feel it even through the thick adobe walls. Heat that would turn the world into a griddle, make every shadow precious. "Where's Serpent's Creek?" Mei Lin asked. 40 miles west. Rough town, rough people, but they don't care about your past if you pull your weight. Rosa walked to a cabinet, pulled out a map so worn the creases had torn through in places. She spread it on the table, pointing. "You're here. Serpent's Creek is here. Between them is a whole lot of nothing. Some canyons where bandits like to wait, and at least one watering hole that's probably dried up by now. Can I make it on foot? No. You'd need a horse, supplies, and someone who knows the way." Rosa folded the map. "Or you could wait here until Rafe comes back through. He usually does, every few weeks." "That's too long." "Then you got a problem." Mei Lin stood, paced to the window. The view showed scrub and sand and a horizon that wavered in rising heat. Somewhere out there, Crow's men were searching. Every hour she stayed put was an hour they got closer. "The horse Rafe was riding," she said. "Where would he go?" "Rafe? Could be anywhere. He's got hideouts scattered across 3 territories, none of them on any map that matters." Rosa studied her. "Why?" "Because he knows the country, and he's already helped me once." "Helped you to hear. Doesn't mean he signed up for more." "I'll ask anyway." Rosa made a sound that might have been approval or pity. "He usually camps near Red Ridge when he's in the area. About 10 miles northeast, rock formations you can't miss. But girl, walking 10 miles in this heat with no supplies is almost as stupid as what you already did." "You have a horse I could borrow?" "Borrow?" Rosa laughed, sharp and short. "I got a mule that's mean as sin and a plow horse that moves like molasses. Neither one's going to get you anywhere fast, and I'm not loaning them out for free." "How much?" "More than you got." Mei Lin felt the weight of impossible settling over her. No horse, no supplies, no skills, and time running out. The universe seemed determined to teach her that freedom came with a price she couldn't afford. "I could work," she said. "Pay you back in labor." Rosa considered this, head tilted. "You know how to cook? Enough not to poison anyone? Clean?" "Yes." "Handle a rifle?" "No." "Then you're about half useful." Rosa sighed. I need help around here anyway. Knees aren't what they used to be, and the last girl I hired ran off with a gambler. She named a figure that would take weeks to earn. That gets you the mule, a canteen, and some hardtack. You die out there, it's not my fault. It was extortion dressed as opportunity. But Mei Lin had learned that survival meant taking bad deals and making them work. When can I start? Right now. Stalls need mucking, floors need scrubbing, and there's laundry that's been piling up for a week. Rosa headed for the door, then paused. And girl, you work slow or lazy, the deal's off. I don't carry dead weight. The next 2 days taught Mei Lin that running into the desert had been the easy part. Rosa worked her like a rented mule, up before dawn, hauling water from the well, scrubbing floors on her knees until her hands were raw, washing sheets and clothes in water so cold it made her fingers ache. The work was endless, brutal, and exactly what she needed, because it gave her time to think, time to understand that Rosa was right. Staying soft meant staying vulnerable. Mei Lin had spent 19 years being quiet, obedient, careful not to make waves. And where had it gotten her? Sold off like livestock, running for her life, dependent on the kindness of strangers who had no reason to be kind. She scrubbed a pot with sand and water, muscles burning, and made a decision. She was done being someone who needed saving. On the afternoon of the second day, a rider approached from the east. Rosa saw him first, went tense in a way that made Mei Lin's hand drift toward her knife. Inside, Rosa said. Now. Mei Lin didn't argue. She moved to the doorway, watching through the gap as a man on a paint horse reined up in the yard. He was younger than Rafe, maybe 25, with the kind of face that might have been handsome if it wasn't set in permanent suspicion. Afternoon, he called out. Looking for someone. Most people are, Rosa said, neutral. Chinese girl. 19, small, probably scared. He pulled out a piece of paper, a notice with a description and a number that made Mei Lin's stomach drop. $500. Answers to Mei Lin Zhao ran from Ash Hollow 3 days back. Haven't seen her. The writer's eyes swept the property, lingering on the laundry hanging on the line, the fresh water in the trough. You sure? 500's a lot of money for not seeing someone. I'm sure. He sat there, weighing whether to push it. Rosa's hand rested casual on the doorframe, but Mei Lin could see the rifle just inside, within easy reach. Well, the writer gathered his reins. You do see her, there's a reward, and Mr. Crow's real interested in getting his property back. I'll keep that in mind. He rode off, dust trailing behind him. Rosa waited until he was out of sight, then turned to Mei Lin. $500. You're more valuable than I thought. I'm not property. Crow thinks different, and 500's enough money to make people forget their principles. Rosa's expression was hard. You need to leave, tonight, because that rider's going to check every way station between here and the border, and when he doesn't find you, he's going to start thinking about who might be lying. But the mule, forget the mule. I'll saddle the plow horse. She's slow, but she's steady, and right now steady's better than nothing. Rosa was already moving, pulling supplies together with practiced efficiency. You still want to find Rafe? Yes? Then head for Red Ridge. If he's not there, keep going west. But girl, you better learn fast, because the next man who finds you might not be interested in taking you back alive. The plow horse was exactly as advertised. A broad-backed gray mare with a disposition like cold oatmeal and a pace that made glaciers look fast. But she was sure-footed, calm, and didn't seem inclined to die in the middle of the desert, which put her ahead of the last horse Mei Lin had ridden. Rosa loaded her up with a bedroll, canteen, dried food, and a rifle so old it looked like it might explode if fired. You know how to use this? Rosa asked, handing over the weapon. No, then don't. It's for show, mostly. But if someone gets close enough that you need to shoot, point it at them and pull the trigger. The noise alone might scare them off. Mei Lin took the rifle, feeling the weight of it. An hour ago, she'd been scrubbing floors. Now she was armed, mounted, and heading back into the desert toward a man she barely knew because he was the only person who'd treated her like something other than a transaction. Why are you helping me? She asked Rosa. The older woman adjusted the saddle straps, not looking up. Because I was 19 once. Had a man tell me what my life was going to be, like I didn't get a say in it. She straightened, met Mei Lin's eyes. I killed him, took his horse, his money, and started over. Best decision I ever made. What happened to you? I got hard, like I told you to. Rosa stepped back. Now get moving before I change my mind and turn you in for that 500 myself. Maylin nudged the mare forward. The animal moved with all the urgency of a Sunday stroll, but at least she moved. Rosa, Maylin called back, thank you. Don't thank me, just live long enough to make it worth the trouble. Red Ridge earned its name, twisted formations of rust-colored rock that jutted from the desert floor like broken teeth. Maylin reached them near dusk, the setting sun turning everything the color of dried blood. The mare picked her way between boulders, sure-footed despite the failing light. Finding Rafe's camp was harder than Rosa had made it sound. The rocks created a maze of passages and dead ends, shadows deep enough to hide anything. Maylin dismounted, leading the mare on foot, listening for sounds of habitation. She found him by accident, rounding a boulder and nearly walking into his campfire. Rafe had his gun out before she could speak, aimed steady at her chest. Then recognition flickered across his face, and he lowered the weapon. You trying to get shot? I'm trying to find you. Congratulations. He holstered the gun, went back to the rabbit he was skinning. What happened to staying put at Rosa's? One of Crow's men showed up. Rosa said I needed to leave. Rafe's hands paused, then continued working. How much is he offering? 500. A low whistle. That's real money. You must have offended him something fierce. Maylin tied the mare to a scrub brush, dropped her bedroll. He paid 3,000 for me. 500's just pride. Pride's expensive. Rafe skewered the rabbit, set it over the fire. Fat dripped, hissing in the flames. So you came here because I need to learn how to survive out here. And you're the only person I know who might teach me. Rafe looked at her, firelight making his face half shadow. Teaching's not my trade. What is your trade? Staying alive, barely. He pulled out a knife, started sharpening it on a stone. The sound was rhythmic, almost meditative. You want survival lessons? There are better teachers. Name one who'll help me for free. Can't. That's why they're better. But there was something in his voice, not agreement exactly, but not refusal either. What makes you think I know anything worth teaching? Maylin sat across the fire from him. Because you move like someone who's had to learn the hard way. Because you knew where to find water in the middle of nothing. Because you're still alive when, I'm guessing, a lot of people have tried to change that. Rafe stopped sharpening, studied her. You're not wrong. But surviving and teaching someone else to survive are different skills. Then I'll learn from watching. Watching me do what? Sit here eating rabbit and waiting for my past to catch up? Better than sitting at Rosa's waiting for Crow's men to drag me back. The rabbit was starting to brown. Rafe turned the spit, adjusted the height. The smell made Maylin's stomach growl despite the hardtack she'd eaten hours ago. You really think learning to shoot and track is going to solve your problem? Rafe asked. I think being helpless guarantees I don't survive. At least this gives me a chance. A small chance. Crow's not going to stop looking. I know. And learning frontier skills takes time you probably don't have. I know that too. Rafe was quiet for a long moment, the only sound the crackle of fire and distant coyotes starting their evening conversation. Then he sighed, the sound of a man making a decision he knew he'd regret. All right. But we do this my way, on my terms. And the first time you slow me down or put me in danger, you're on your own. Understood? Relief hit Maylin so hard she almost smiled. Understood. And for the record, I'm a terrible teacher. Ask anyone who's tried to learn from me. Are any of them still alive? No, but that's not really the point. They ate the rabbit in silence, grease running down their fingers, the meat tough but edible. Rafe divided it evenly, which Maylin noticed, another small gesture that didn't match the hard exterior he wore like armor. After, while Maylin cleaned the bones for marrow, Rafe laid out what he called the basics. First thing, forget everything you think you know about being safe. Out here, safety's a lie people tell themselves. The desert wants you dead, animals want you dead, and most people want whatever you got. Accept that, and you stop wasting energy on false hope. Comforting. Truth's not supposed to be comforting. He pulled out his rifle, started breaking it down. Second, a gun's only useful if you can hit what you're aiming at. Most people can't. They panic, pull the trigger too fast, waste ammunition, and die anyway. You want to learn to shoot, you're going to practice until your shoulder's bruised and your hands shake. No shortcuts. I can handle that. We'll see. He reassembled the rifle, handed it to her. Hold it. Show me what you'd do if I was attacking you. Mei-Lin raised the weapon, tried to sight along the barrel. The rifle was heavier than she expected, awkward in her grip. Rafe watched, expression neutral. You'd be dead. Guns pointed at my feet, your stance is wrong, and you're gripping it like it's going to jump out of your hands. He moved behind her, adjusted her position. Feet shoulder width, butt of the rifle tight against your shoulder. Cheek on the stock, breathe steady. His hands on her shoulders were impersonal, corrective. Mei-Lin tried to focus on the mechanics instead of the proximity. Now, Rafe said, stepping back. Pull the trigger. Click. Empty chamber. Again. Click. Again. They did this for what felt like hours, dry firing, adjusting stance, learning to squeeze instead of pull, understanding how the weapon wanted to be held. Mei-Lin's arms started shaking from the weight, but Rafe didn't let her stop. Out here, tired is when you die, he said. You need to shoot just as straight on no sleep, an empty stomach as you do fresh. So we practice until your body remembers even when your brain's too exhausted to think. By the time he called a halt, Mei-Lin's shoulders were screaming and her hands had gone numb. She lowered the rifle, flexing her fingers. That's enough for tonight, Rafe said. Tomorrow we'll try actual bullets. Fair warning, the recoil's going to hurt. I can take it. Everyone says that. He took the rifle back, started cleaning it. Get some sleep. We're up before dawn. Mei-Lin spread her bedroll on the far side of the fire, the rifle Rosa had given her within reach. Not that she could use it effectively, but the weight was reassuring. Rafe? She said into the darkness. What? Why are you doing this? The fire popped, sending sparks spiraling upward. When Rafe answered, his voice was quieter than before. Because someone taught me once, kept me alive when I should have died. He paused. Didn't end well for him, but the lesson stuck. What happened? What always happens. Good people die, and the rest of us keep going. He rolled over, ending the conversation. Now sleep. Morning's going to be rough. Morning was worse than rough. Rafe woke her before the sun cleared the horizon, tossed her a canteen and a piece of jerky. Eat while you ride. We're burning daylight. They left Red Ridge heading northwest. Through terrain that got progressively more hostile, rocky canyons gave way to open flats where the sun hammered down without mercy. Rafe set a pace that had Mei-Lin's thighs screaming within an hour, but he didn't slow. Lesson 1, he said over his shoulder. Comfort kills. You get comfortable, you get sloppy. Sloppy out here means dead. They stopped mid-morning in the shade of an overhang. Rafe pulled out his rifle, loaded it, and handed it to Mei-Lin. See that cactus, the tall one, about 50 yards out? Mei-Lin squinted. Yes. Hit it. She raised the rifle, tried to remember everything from the night before. Breathe, steady, squeeze. The explosion nearly knocked her over. The recoil slammed into her shoulder like a mule kick, and the bullet went wide by at least 10 feet. Again, it took 6 shots before she clipped the cactus. Her shoulder felt like raw meat, ears ringing from the reports. Not terrible, Rafe said, which from him might as well have been effusive praise. You're flinching before the shot, anticipating the recoil instead of accepting it. Practice that out and you might hit what you're aiming at half the time. Only half? Half's better than most. They rode until noon, practiced shooting until Mei-Lin couldn't lift her arms, then rode some more. Rafe pointed out signs she'd never have noticed. Disturbed earth that meant riders had passed recently. The way shadows pooled that indicated water. The particular flight pattern of birds that signaled predators below. Survival's about reading what's in front of you, he said. Desert talks if you know the language. Most people don't bother learning, and that's why they die. At night, he taught her to make a fire that didn't smoke, to find north by stars, to sleep light so any sound would wake her. The lessons came rapid fire. No repetition, no coddling. You get one chance to learn this, Rafe said. I'm not going to be around forever to remind you. 3 days passed like this. Mei-Lin felt herself changing. Not just physically, though her hands were developing calluses, and her skin was turning brown from constant sun. Something deeper was shifting. The fear that had driven her from Ash Hollow was still there. But it was becoming something else, something sharper. On the fourth day, they encountered other riders. Rafe saw them first, a tight expression crossing his face. 3 men, coming fast from the south. Crows? Don't know yet, but we're not waiting to find out. He spurred his gelding toward a cluster of rocks. Move, now! They took cover behind a formation that gave them sightlines in 3 directions. Rafe pulled his rifle, and Mei Lin did the same, her heart hammering. The riders resolved into clarity, 2 men and a woman, all armed, all looking like they'd been on the trail for days. They stopped about 100 yards out, clearly having spotted Rafe and Mei Lin's dust. One of the men cupped his hands. We're just passing through, no trouble wanted. Rafe didn't lower his rifle, then passed through somewhere else. Water's scarce, thought maybe you'd share. Thought wrong. The woman said something to her companions. They talked among themselves, too low to hear. Then they rode on, giving Rafe and Mei Lin wide berth. Rafe watched until they were out of sight. That's how most trouble starts. Someone needing something you got, deciding taking's easier than asking. They seemed reasonable. Seemed, but you don't survive by trusting seems. He lowered the rifle, though they probably were just thirsty. This time. They camped that night in a narrow canyon where the walls provided protection from 3 sides. Rafe built a small fire, set rabbit snares, and then sat cleaning his guns with methodical care. Mei Lin watched him work, the practiced movements of someone who'd done this thousands of times. Can I ask you something? She said. Can't stop you. The man you mentioned, the one who taught you, what was his name? Rafe's hands stilled. Why? Because you never talk about your past, and I'm trying to understand who you are. I'm someone who survives. That's all you need to understand. But his name was Thomas. The words came out flat, final. He pulled me out of a bad situation, taught me how to stay alive, and got killed for the trouble. That enough for you? How did he die? Bullet meant for me. Rafe went back to cleaning the gun. Happy now? Mei Lin wasn't happy. She was sad for a man she'd never met and for the weight Rafe clearly carried. I'm sorry, she said. Don't be. He made his choice, same as I'm making mine. Rafe set the gun aside, looked at her across the fire. You're learning fast, faster than you should be. In a few more weeks, you might actually be dangerous. A few weeks? I don't have that long. Then you better hope luck's on your side, because skill takes time, and you're running short on both. The words sat heavy between them. Mei Lin knew he was right. Crow's net was tightening. The more time she spent learning, the more time his men had to search. So what do I do? She asked. You make a choice. Rafe poked the fire, sending sparks upward. Keep running and hope they don't catch you. Or stop running and make them wish they hadn't found you. You think I'm ready for that? No. But ready and necessary aren't always the same thing. He stood, stretched. Get some sleep. Tomorrow we head towards Serpent's Creek. You can decide there what comes next. But sleep was hard to find. Mei Lin lay in her bedroll, staring at stars that looked like holes punched in black paper, and thought about choices. Running had gotten her this far. But Rafe was right. Eventually, running stopped working, and when it did, she'd need to be someone who could stand and fight. The question was whether she had it in her to become that person before Crow's men made the choice for her. Serpent's Creek announced itself with the smell of sulfur and unwashed bodies before they ever saw the buildings. The mining town squatted in a valley between 2 ridges like something ashamed of its own existence. Crooked structures made from whatever materials came cheap, canvas tents mixed with half-finished timber frames, and a main street that was more mud than road. Home sweet home, Rafe said, his tone making it clear what he thought of the place. They rode in mid-afternoon when the heat was at its worst. Men in dirt-caked clothes moved between buildings with the shuffle of people too tired to care where they were going. A few looked up as Rafe and Mei Lin passed, eyes tracking them with the dull interest of those who'd seen everything and been impressed by nothing. Stay close, Rafe said, and don't make eye contact unless you're ready to back it up. The saloon was the largest building, which told Mei Lin everything she needed to know about the town's priorities. Rafe dismounted, tied his gelding to the rail. Mei Lin did the same with the plow horse, her hand instinctively checking the rifle Rosa had given her. Leave it, Rafe said. Walking in armed makes you a target. Walking in confident makes you a maybe. Inside, the saloon was dark and smelled like spilled beer and something worse. A dozen men were scattered across tables, nursing drinks that looked like they'd been nursing them all day. Behind the bar, a man with arms like tree trunks was wiping glasses with a rag that probably made them dirtier. Rafe walked to the bar like he owned it. Whiskey, 2 glasses. The bartender poured without comment. Rafe slid 1 glass to Mei Lin, who looked at it like it might bite. "You don't have to drink it," Rafe said quietly. "Just hold it. Looks strange if you don't." She wrapped her fingers around the glass, feeling the cheap liquor burn her nose just from the fumes. A man at a corner table stood, chair scraping loud against the floor. He was big, running to fat around the middle, with a beard that looked like something had died in it. His eyes landed on Mei Lin with the kind of attention that made her skin crawl. "Well now," he said, voice carrying across the room. "What's a little China doll doing in a place like this?" Rafe's expression didn't change. "Minding her own business suggests you do the same." "I'm just being friendly." The man walked closer, and Mei Lin could smell him from 5 feet away. "Pretty thing like her shouldn't be with a hard case like you, Callahan. Maybe she wants better company." "She doesn't." "Why don't we let her decide?" He reached for Mei Lin's arm. She jerked back, the glass sloshing whiskey onto the bar. The room went quiet, the kind of quiet that preceded violence. Rafe turned slowly, positioning himself between Mei Lin and the man. "Walk away, Dixon, while you still can." Dixon grinned, showing teeth that had gone mostly brown. "Or what? You gonna shoot me in front of witnesses? That'd bring the law down hard, even out here." "Don't need a gun." Rafe's voice was flat. "And there's no law in Serpent's Creek except what we make." For a long moment, it could have gone either way. Then Dixon laughed, the sound forced and too loud. "Just having fun, Callahan. No need to get touchy." He backed toward his table, hands up in mock surrender. "But you might want to keep your woman on a shorter leash. Someone might get the wrong idea." Rafe didn't respond. He finished his whiskey in 1 swallow, set the glass down with a deliberate click. "We're done here," he said to Mei Lin. "Let's go." Outside, the sunlight felt like punishment after the bar's dimness. Mei Lin's hands were shaking, and she hated herself for it. She'd faced down the desert, learned to shoot, traveled for days through hostile country, and one drunk's attention had reduced her to trembling. "That's gonna happen," Rafe said, reading her expression. "Men like Dixon, they see a woman and think she's public property. Best you can do is stay armed and hope they're smart enough to back down. And if they're not smart, then you shoot them." He said it like discussing the weather. "But first you give them a chance to walk away. Most will take it." "Most isn't all." "No, it's not." Rafe started walking down the main street, Mei Lin following. "There's a boarding house at the end of town, run by a woman named Martha. She's fair if you pay on time and don't cause trouble." "I can't afford boarding." "Then you'll need to find work. Mining's out. They don't hire women for that. But there's laundry, cooking, probably bar work if you're desperate." Mei Lin thought about standing in a place like the saloon every night, dealing with men like Dixon, and felt her stomach turn. "What about you? What are you going to do?" Rafe stopped, looked at her with something that might have been regret. "This is where we part ways. I got you somewhere safer than the desert. Taught you what I could. Rest is up to you." The words hit harder than they should have. Mei Lin had known this was coming. Rafe had made it clear from the start that he wasn't signing up for permanent company. But somewhere over the past week, she'd started thinking of him as more than just a stranger who'd helped. Started thinking they were in this together. "Just like that?" she said. "You're leaving?" "I've got business. Things I've been putting off that won't wait any longer." "What kind of business?" Rafe's jaw tightened. "The kind that gets people killed. And I've already risked your life enough." "Let me help." "No." "Why not? I can shoot now. I'm getting better every day, whatever you're facing." "Mei Lin." He turned to face her fully, and his expression was harder than she'd seen it. "You're still running from one man. I'm running from a dozen, and they're all a lot more dangerous than Silas Crow. You tag along with me, you'll be dead inside a week. That what you want?" "I want to not be left alone in a town full of men who look at me like meat." The words came out sharper than intended, edged with fear she couldn't quite hide. Rafe's expression softened fractionally. "Then you make yourself too dangerous to treat that way," he said. "Find work, keep practicing, and maybe you survive long enough to become something other than a victim. He pulled out a small bag, pressed it into her hand. $30. That'll keep you fed for a month if you're careful. I can't take this. You can and you will. Call it payment for putting up with my terrible teaching. He tipped his hat, a gesture so formal it felt like goodbye. Stay alive, Mei-Lin Zhao. And if you're smart, you'll forget you ever met me. He walked to his horse, mounted, and rode out of Serpent's Creek without looking back. Mei-Lin stood in the dusty street, $30 in her hand, and the weight of abandonment settling over her like a wet coat. Around her, the town continued its slow decay. Somewhere a dog barked. A woman yelled at someone in Spanish. The saloon piano started up, playing something that might have been a tune if the player had any skill. She'd wanted freedom. Here it was, alone in a mining town with enough money to last a month and absolutely no plan beyond that. The boarding house Martha ran turned out to be a two-story structure that leaned slightly to the left, like it was trying to escape its own foundation. Martha herself was a severe woman in her 50s, with gray hair pulled back so tight it looked painful, and eyes that assessed Mei-Lin in one quick scan. $6 a week, paid in advance. Meals extra. No visitors after dark, no drinking in the rooms, no disruptions. Mei-Lin counted out $6, watching her small fortune shrink. Martha took the money, handed her a key attached to a wooden tag. Room 4, second floor. Laundries Monday and Thursday. You cause trouble, you're out. Understood? Understood. The room was smaller than the one at Rose's, with a bed that sagged in the middle, a washstand, and a window that looked out over the street. But it was hers, at least for a week. Mei-Lin set her satchel on the bed, checked that her mother's bracelet was still wrapped in its cloth, and allowed herself exactly 1 minute of feeling overwhelmed. Then she went downstairs to find work. The town offered exactly the options Rafe had predicted: laundry, cooking, or bar work. The laundry was run by a Chinese couple who already had more help than they needed. The restaurant kitchen had just hired someone, which left the saloon. Mei-Lin stood outside the building as the sun set, turning the sky the color of old copper. Every instinct screamed at her to find another option, but there were no other options, and her money was disappearing faster than she'd expected. She pushed through the doors. Dixon was still there, now significantly drunker. He looked up as she entered, that same predatory grin spreading across his face. Well, look who came back. Changed your mind about better company? Mei-Lin walked past him to the bar, where the owner, a man who'd introduced himself as Bill, was tallying receipts. I'm looking for work, she said. Bill looked her over. You done bar work before? No, but I learned fast. Can you handle drunks without crying or shooting them? Mei-Lin thought about Dixon, about Crow, about every man who'd looked at her like she was something to own. Yes. Pays $2 a day plus tips. You work 6 nights a week, 8 until close. Any trouble you can't handle, you yell for me. But you start trouble, you're fired. That clear? Clear. You start tomorrow. Show up on time or don't show up at all. Mei-Lin worked 6 nights at the saloon before the fragile peace shattered. She'd learned to move through the crowd with a tray, dodge groping hands with practiced efficiency, and smile just enough to earn tips without encouraging assumptions. The work was exhausting and degrading, but it paid. Dixon had left her alone after that first night, though his eyes tracked her movement with an attention that made her skin crawl. Other men tried their luck, offering drinks, making suggestions, assuming her smile meant interest. She turned them all down with enough politeness that Bill didn't fire her and enough firmness that most backed off. Most, not all. On the 7th night, a group of men came in loud and already drunk. They threw money on the bar, demanded whiskey, and started a poker game that quickly got heated. Mei-Lin tried to stay clear of their table, but one of them, a stringy man with a scar across his cheek, grabbed her wrist as she passed. Bring us a bottle, sweetheart, and make it quick. She pulled free. I'll send it over. I said bring it. His grip tightened. Or are you too good for working men? Let go. Make me. The room was watching now, that same dangerous quiet from her first day. Bill was at the far end of the bar, dealing with another customer. Dixon sat in his corner, grinning. Mei-Lin thought about Rafe's lessons, about becoming too dangerous to mess with, about the line between victim and something else. She drove her heel down on the man's instep with all her weight. He yelped, releasing her wrist. She stepped back, hand going to the knife at her belt, small, inadequate, but visible. "Touch me again," she said, voice carrying across the room, "and I'll cut something you'll miss." The scarred man stood, chair falling backward. His friend stood with him, 3 against 1, and Mei Lin's knife looked pathetic against the odds. Then a voice from the doorway said, 4 against 1 seems unfair. Mind if I even things up? Rafe walked in like he'd never left, rifle loose in his hands, expression bored. But his eyes were locked on the scarred man with the focus of a predator choosing targets. "This ain't your business, Callahan," the man said. "Sure it is. Lady's a friend of mine. That makes it personal." Rafe moved to stand beside Mei Lin, close enough that she could feel the heat coming off him. "Now you boys can apologize and get back to your card game, or we can see who's still standing when the dust settles. Your choice." The scarred man looked between Rafe's rifle and Mei Lin's knife, and apparently decided neither option was worth it. "Just having fun." "Fun's over. Apologize." A long pause, then grudging, "Sorry." "Good. Now sit down and shut up." They sat. The room's tension eased fractionally. Bill came over, looking relieved and annoyed in equal measure. "Callahan, didn't expect to see you back. Had business nearby, thought I'd check in." He glanced at Mei Lin. "You got a minute?" She followed him outside, legs shaking with adrenaline crash. The night air was cool, the street mostly empty. "What are you doing here?" she asked. "Saw you through the window. Figured you might need backup." He leaned against the building, studied her. "You handled that pretty well, actually, right up until the part where you were about to get your face rearranged. I had it under control." "Sure you did." But he almost smiled. "You're getting harder. That's good. Means the lesson stuck. I thought you had business, things that couldn't wait." "I did. I do." Rafe pulled out tobacco, started rolling a cigarette. "But turns out the business is heading this direction anyway. Man I'm looking for runs a ranch about 20 miles north of here." Something in his voice made Mei Lin look closer. "What man?" "Victor Hale. He's the reason I've been running for the past 3 years. Put a bounty on my head. Sent hunters after me. Made it so I can't settle anywhere without watching my back." He lit the cigarette, inhaled. "I'm done running from him." "What are you going to do?" "End it. One way or another." He met her eyes. "Which is why I came back to say goodbye properly. And to warn you." "Warn me about what?" "Hale's got men everywhere. Some of them might come through Serpent's Creek asking questions. If they ask about me, you don't know me, never met me. That clear?" Mei Lin felt cold despite the warm night. "You think they'd hurt me to get to you?" "I think they'd hurt anyone. So you stay clear, keep your head down, and forget I exist." He pushed off the building. "I mean it, Mei Lin. This isn't your fight." But even as he said it, Mei Lin was thinking about the past 2 weeks, about everything Rafe had taught her, the way he'd kept her alive when she should have died, the fact that he'd come back tonight because he'd seen her in trouble. "When are you going after him?" she asked. "Day after tomorrow, soon as I get supplies together." Rafe started toward his horse. "Stay safe. And Mei Lin, you're stronger than you think. Don't let this town make you forget that." He rode off for the second time, and Mei Lin stood in the street feeling like she'd just been handed a choice she didn't want to make. She could stay in Serpent's Creek, keep working at the saloon, dodging hands and threats, slowly saving money until she had enough to disappear somewhere else. It was survival. It was safe. It was the smart choice. Or she could do something monumentally stupid. The next morning, Mei Lin quit her job at the saloon, packed her few belongings, and used most of her remaining money to buy supplies. Ammunition for the rifle, dried food, a better knife, a canteen that didn't leak. Martha watched her load up the plow horse with a knowing expression. "You're going after him," she said. Not a question. "I don't know what you're talking about. That Callahan boy. Saw the way you two looked at each other last night. You're either running toward something or away from something, and you got the look of someone running toward." Mei Lin cinched the saddle strap. "He helped me. I'm returning the favor." "By getting yourself killed?" Martha shook her head. "Victor Hale's not a man you cross and walk away from. Callahan's probably dead already, just doesn't know it yet." "Then I guess I'll be dead too." "That's supposed to be romantic? Because it just sounds stupid?" Mei Lin swung into the saddle. "Probably both." She found Rafe's trail heading north, following the signs he'd taught her to read. Hoofprints, disturbed earth, broken sage branches. The country got rougher the further she went, climbing into foothills where the air tasted like pine and old snow. She caught up to him late afternoon, riding through a narrow canyon. He heard her coming, turned in his saddle, and his expression went from surprise to anger. "What the hell are you doing?" "Following you." "I can see that. I'm asking why." Mei Lin reined up beside him. "Because you're going to do something dangerous and stupid, and apparently I've decided your chances are better with backup. My chances are 0 either way. All you're doing is making sure we both die. Then we die together." She met his eyes. "I'm not running anymore, Rafe. Not from Crow, not from this, not from anything. You taught me to stand and fight, so I'm fighting." Rafe looked at her for a long moment, jaw working like he was chewing on words he wanted to say but couldn't quite form. Then he shook his head. "You're insane. You know that?" "Probably." Mei Lin nudged her horse forward. "But I learned from you." They rode in silence for a while, climbing higher into country that felt like the edge of the world. Finally, Rafe spoke. "Hale's ranch is in a valley on the other side of this ridge. He's got maybe a dozen men, all of them mean, and most of them wanted somewhere. Place is built like a fortress. One way in, steep walls on all sides. So, how do we get to him?" "We don't. I'm going to walk in the front door and settle this face to face." "That's your plan? Walk in and hope he doesn't shoot you?" "More or less." Rafe's voice was grim. "Hale's got a code, twisted as hell, but it exists. He'll give me a chance to draw, might even be fair about it. And if you're wrong, then I'm dead and you ride away fast as that plow horse can manage." They made camp that night in a grove of aspen trees, the leaves whispering overhead like gossip. Rafe built a small fire and sat staring into it like it held answers he couldn't quite read. "You don't have to do this," Mei Lin said. "Yeah, I do." He poked the fire with a stick. 3 years ago, I worked for Hale, did enforcement for him, collected debts, scared people, generally made sure his empire ran smooth. I was good at it, too good. What changed? He ordered me to kill someone. Man owed money, couldn't pay, had a wife and 2 little girls. Rafe's voice was flat. I refused. Hale said that made me weak, put a bounty on my head to prove his point. What happened to the man? Hale sent someone else. Killed the whole family. He looked up, eyes reflecting firelight. That's on me. I could have saved them if I'd just followed orders, or if I'd stood up to Hale properly instead of running. You did what you thought was right, and they died anyway. So what good was being right? He tossed the stick into the fire. That's why I'm ending this. Not for me, for them. And for everyone else Hale's going to hurt if someone doesn't stop him. Mei Lin understood then that this wasn't about survival or revenge or clearing his name. This was penance. Rafe was walking into Hale's fortress because he believed he deserved whatever happened there. You're not going alone, she said. Mei Lin, I said I'm not running. I meant it. She pulled out the rifle, started checking it over. Whatever happens tomorrow, we face it together. That's not negotiable. Rafe watched her, something that might have been gratitude flickering across his face. You really are insane. Yeah, but at least I'm consistent. They came down from the ridge at dawn, when the world was still half darkness, and the valley below looked like something from a dream. Hale's ranch sprawled across the valley floor. Main house, bunkhouse, barns, corrals, all of it built from timber and stone and too much money. Smoke rose from chimneys, horses moved in the corrals, men were already up, starting the day's work. Last chance to turn back, Rafe said. Mei Lin checked her rifle one more time. Not interested. They rode down together, exposed on the open slope. Someone spotted them when they were still half a mile out. She saw the man pointing, saw others gathering. By the time they reached the valley floor, a dozen armed men were waiting in front of the main house. And standing in the center like a king among peasants was Victor Hale. He was older than Mei Lin expected, maybe 60, with silver hair and a face that looked carved from granite. But his eyes were young, sharp, assessing them both with the casual interest of a predator watching prey walk into range. Rafe Callahan, he said, voice carrying across the distance. I wondered if you'd ever grow a spine. I'm here, Hale. Let's finish this. Finish it? Hale stepped forward, flanked by his men. Boy, we haven't even started. You ran for 3 years. Made me look weak. That debt's going to take more than a showdown to settle. Then tell me what it takes. Hale's eyes shifted to Mei Lin. Who's the girl? Nobody. She's leaving. I don't think so. Hale smiled, and it was the coldest thing Mei Lin had ever seen. She rode in with you. She's part of this now. And I'm thinking maybe watching her die first is exactly the motivation you need to really suffer. The men around Hale raised their weapons. Mei Lin's hands tightened on her rifle, mathematics running through her head. 12 against 2, exposed position, no cover, no escape route. They were about to die. Then Rafe did something unexpected. He laughed. You think I came here unprepared? You think I'm still that stupid kid who ran from you? He gestured behind him, toward the ridge they'd just descended. Look up, Hale. Look at what's waiting. Hale's men turned, following his gesture. There was nothing there, but the moment of distraction was all they needed. Rafe spurred his horse forward, rifle coming up. Mei Lin did the same, muscle memory taking over. She fired at the nearest man, saw him drop, fired again. The world exploded into gunfire and chaos. Rafe was moving, weaving his horse between Hale's men, firing with precision that spoke of years doing exactly this kind of work. Mei Lin stayed close, following his lead, shooting when she had a clear target and praying when she didn't. A bullet whined past her head, another punched through her sleeve without touching skin. The plow horse screamed but kept moving, bless her steady old heart. Hale was shouting orders, but his men were panicking, caught between holding position and taking cover. 3 were down already, 4. The odds were shifting, but not fast enough. Mei Lin's rifle clicked empty. She dropped it, pulled the knife, and kept riding because stopping meant dying. A man grabbed her horse's bridle, trying to drag them down. Mei Lin leaned out of the saddle and drove the knife into his shoulder. He screamed, "Let go." She kicked the horse forward, following Rafe toward the house where Hale had retreated. They crashed through the front door into a room full of expensive furniture and mounted animal heads. Hale was at the far end, gun drawn. "Just you and me now, Rafe," he said, "the way it should be." Rafe dismounted, standing in the doorway. "The way it should be is you dead 3 years ago." Bold words from a man who's outnumbered. Hale's gun was steady. "I kill you. I still got plenty of men outside to deal with your girl." "You're not killing anyone." Mei Lin stepped through the door behind Rafe, her rifle, reloaded somehow. When had she reloaded? Aimed at Hale. "Drop the gun." Hale looked between them, calculating odds. 2 on 1. Not exactly honorable. "You want to talk about honor?" Rafe's voice was cold. "You killed a family because one man owed you money. You put a price on my head for having a conscience. You've built an empire on fear and blood. Where's the honor in that? I built an empire that works, that keeps order in a place that would tear itself apart without strong leadership. You built a dictatorship. Same thing." For a moment, everything hung balanced. Then Hale's gun twitched toward Mei Lin. Rafe fired. The bullet took Hale in the chest, punching him backward against the wall. His gun clattered to the floor. He slid down, leaving a red streak on the wood paneling. "You," Hale coughed, blood on his lips. "You actually did it." "Yeah." Rafe walked closer, gun still trained. "I did." "The bounty. It'll never go away. Someone else will take over." "Let them try." Hale laughed, the sound wet and failing. "That girl. She's made you weak again. And weak is what gets you killed." His eyes went empty. The room filled with silence so complete Mei Lin could hear her own heartbeat. Outside, the gunfire had stopped. Rafe moved to the window, careful. The remaining men were scattered, some wounded, some dead, the rest running for horses. "They're leaving," he said. "Why?" "Because Hale was the center. Without him, there's nothing holding them together." He turned from the window. "We should go, before they regroup and decide revenge is worth it." They rode out of the valley as the sun climbed higher, turning the world from gray to gold. Behind them, Hale's ranch was already falling apart, men looting what they could carry, buildings standing empty, an empire collapsing in real time. Mei Lin's hands shook on the reins. Adrenaline was draining away, leaving behind exhaustion and the kind of clarity that comes after surviving something you shouldn't have. "That was the stupidest thing I've ever done," she said. Rafe glanced over and he was almost smiling. "Welcome to the club. We could have died." "Yeah, but we didn't. We should have died. The odds were impossible." "Odds are always impossible." He reined his horse to a stop, looked back at the valley one last time. But impossible just means you haven't figured out how yet. Maylin stopped beside him. What do we do now? Now? Rafe considered the question. Now we run again. But this time, we're not running from. We're running toward. Toward what? I don't know yet. But we've got time to figure it out. They rode north, leaving the valley and its dead behind. The mountains rose ahead, purple in the distance, promising country neither of them had seen. And for the first time since Ash Hollow, Maylin felt something that wasn't fear or desperation or the weight of choices that could never be unmade. She felt free. The feeling lasted exactly 3 miles. They were following a creek bed north when the sky changed color. What had been clear blue turned the shade of old bruises, purple-black clouds boiling up from the western horizon like smoke from a fire too big to control. The wind picked up, carrying the smell of rain and something electric that made the horses nervous. Storm coming, Rafe said, unnecessary, but said anyway. Maylin looked at the clouds, at the way they were moving faster than seemed natural. How bad? Bad enough. He scanned the terrain, searching for shelter that didn't exist. They were in open country, rolling hills with scattered trees and nothing that would protect them from what was coming. We need to find cover, now. They pushed the horses hard, racing the storm. The wind got stronger, whipping Maylin's hair across her face, turning the world into a blur of motion. Thunder rolled across the hills, so deep she felt it in her chest. The rain hit like a physical blow. One moment it was dry, the next they were drowning in water that fell so hard it stung exposed skin. Visibility dropped to nothing. The horses were panicking, fighting the rains. There! Rafe shouted over the roar, pointing toward a dark shape that might have been rocks, or might have been wishful thinking. They made it to the outcropping just as lightning split the sky close enough that Maylin's hair stood on end. The horses scrambled up a rocky slope, hooves slipping on stone that was already slick. Thunder followed immediately, so loud it felt like the world breaking. The overhang was barely deep enough to be called shelter, a scoop in the hillside that kept off maybe half the rain. Rafe pulled the horses as far back as they'd go, then helped Maylin down. She was shaking, soaked through, and the cold was already setting into her bones. Get your bedroll, Rafe said, shouting to be heard. Wrap up in it. We're going to be here a while. The storm raged for hours. Rain came in sheets, driven nearly horizontal by wind that screamed through the rocks. Lightning turned night into stuttering day, each flash revealing a world gone mad with water and violence. The horses stood pressed against the back wall, trembling but holding. Maylin huddled in her bedroll, teeth chattering despite her best efforts. Rafe sat beside her, rifle across his knees, watching the storm like he expected it to attack. How long? She managed through chattering teeth. Until it's done. That's not helpful. It's honest. He glanced at her, saw how she was shaking. After a moment's hesitation, he shifted closer, sharing body heat without making it obvious. Desert storms don't last long, but when they hit hard. A gust of wind drove rain into their shelter, soaking them again. Maylin pressed closer to Rafe without thinking, seeking warmth that barely existed. He didn't pull away. We survived hail, she said, trying to distract herself from the cold. Now we're going to die of exposure in a storm. We're not dying. You sound very confident for someone who's soaking wet and shivering. I've survived worse. When? Rafe was quiet for a moment, watching lightning dance across the hills. Winter of '73. I was 16, running from the farm I grew up on. Got caught in a blizzard in the Rockies with no supplies and a horse that couldn't handle the cold. Spent 3 days in a cave eating snow and trying not to freeze. What happened? The horse died. I didn't. He said it flat, matter of fact. Ate the horse to stay alive, walked out when the storm cleared. Maylin tried to imagine being 16 and alone in a blizzard, making the kind of choices that kept you breathing. Why were you running? Same reason everyone runs. To get away from something worse than what I was running toward. He shifted, adjusting the rifle. My father had opinions about how sons should behave. I had different opinions. Disagreement got violent. So you left. So I survived. He looked at her. Like you did. Like we're doing now. The storm intensified, wind howling through the rocks with a sound like screaming. Maylin closed her eyes, trying to ignore the cold, the wet. The voice in her head that said they'd made a terrible mistake leaving Hale's Valley. Sometime near dawn, the wind died. The rain continued, but softer, without the violence that had defined the night. Mei Lin must have slept because she woke to gray light and Rafe shaking her shoulder. "We need to move." Everything hurt. Her muscles had stiffened from cold and hours in one position, and her clothes were still damp despite the bedroll. She forced herself up, joints cracking. The world outside their shelter was transformed. The creek they'd been following was now a river, brown water churning past, carrying debris, branches, tumbleweeds, something that might have been part of a building. The hills were muddy, treacherous, already starting to steam as weak sunlight broke through clouds. "Our supplies," Mei Lin said, looking at the horses. The packs were soaked through, water dripping from seams. Rafe was already checking them, his expression getting grimmer with each item he examined. "Powder's wet, most of the food's ruined. Canteens are fine, but everything else—" He stopped, holding up what used to be their map. The paper disintegrated in his hands. "We're traveling blind. How far did we get from the valley?" "Maybe 10 miles, not far enough." He repacked what was salvageable, which wasn't much. "We keep moving north, find a town, resupply, figure out what's next." "With what money? We spent everything on supplies that are now ruined." Rafe pulled out a small leather pouch from inside his jacket, one of the few things that had stayed dry. He opened it, showing gold coins. "Took this from Hale's office while you were reloading. Call it payment for 3 years of running." "You stole from a dead man." "He stole from plenty of living ones. I'm just redistributing." He tucked the pouch away. "It's enough to get us set up somewhere. Maybe even buy some land if we're careful." The idea was so foreign to Mei Lin's recent experience that she almost laughed. Land, permanence, a life that wasn't defined by running. "You think that's possible?" she asked. "After everything?" "I think possible is whatever we make it." He swung into his saddle, wincing slightly. The night's cold had gotten to him too. "But first we survived the next few days." They rode through mud that sucked at the horses' hooves, across hills that wanted to slide out from under them. The plow horse handled it better than Rafe's gelding, her steady temperament an asset in terrain that punished speed. By midday, the clouds had cleared completely, and the sun beat down with the same merciless intensity it had shown before the storm. Mei Lin's damp clothes steamed, then dried stiff with salt and dirt. Her skin felt tight, burned by sun and chafed by wet fabric. Every movement reminded her that she'd spent the night in fighting, then in a storm, and that her body had limits she kept pushing past. "We need to rest," she said finally. Rafe looked back, saw how she was swaying in the saddle. "Another mile. There's a rise ahead. We'll have better sight lines, see if anyone's following." Who would be following? Hale's men who decided revenge is worth it. Bounty hunters who heard about the fight. Crow's people if they tracked you this far. He kept riding. "Always assume someone's following. Keeps you alive longer." They made it to the rise, and Rafe finally called a halt. Mei Lin slid off the plow horse and immediately sat down hard, legs refusing to hold her. Everything was shaking, hands, legs. Even her vision seemed to wobble. Rafe was beside her in an instant. "When'd you last eat?" Mei Lin tried to remember. Before the fight? During the storm? Time had become elastic, meaningless. "I don't know." He pulled out a piece of jerky that had somehow survived the storm, pressed it into her hand. "Eat. Slow." The meat was tough as leather and tasted like salt and smoke, and the best thing she'd ever put in her mouth. She forced herself to chew slowly, feeling strength trickle back into her limbs. Rafe was scanning the horizon with the single-minded focus of someone who'd learned that relaxing got you killed. After a long moment, he seemed satisfied. "Nothing moving. We're clear for now." "How far to the nearest town?" "I don't know. Without the map." He shook his head. "Could be 5 miles, could be 50. We'll know when we see buildings." "And if we don't find a town?" "Then we keep going until we do." He sat down beside her, pulled out his own jerky. "You did good back there. At the valley." The compliment surprised her. "I nearly got us killed." "No, my decision to face Hale nearly got us killed. You just made sure we didn't die alone." He chewed, swallowed. "That bluff about men on the ridge? That was quick thinking. It was a desperate lie. Same thing, usually." He almost smiled. "But it worked. That's what matters." They sat in silence, eating jerky and watching the empty country stretch out in all directions. Somewhere out there was civilization, law, the possibility of a life that didn't involve running. But from here, it all looked the same. Endless, hostile, indifferent to whether they lived or died. "Can I ask you something?" Maylin said. "Can't stop you." "At Hales, when you shot him, did it feel like you thought it would?" Rafe considered the question. "I thought it would feel like justice, like settling accounts." He paused. "It just felt like killing a man, same as it always does." "Does it get easier?" "No, you just get better at living with it." He looked at her. "Why? You regretting coming along?" Maylin thought about the man she'd stabbed, the others she'd shot at, the violence she'd participated in without hesitation. A month ago, the idea would have horrified her. Now it just felt like Tuesday. "I don't know what I'm regretting," she said finally. "Everything? Nothing? I'm free, but I'm running. I'm alive, but I've got blood on my hands. I wanted to be someone who couldn't be owned, and now I'm someone I don't recognize." "You recognize yourself fine. You just don't like what you're seeing." "Do you like what you see? When you look at yourself?" Rafe was quiet for a long time. "I see someone who's survived. That's all I got the energy to care about." They found the town 3 days later, after living on what little food remained and water from streams still swollen with storm runoff. The settlement was called Redemption, which Maylin thought was either deeply ironic or perfectly fitting. It was bigger than Serpent's Creek, more established, with actual streets and buildings that looked like they were planning to stay vertical. A church sat at one end of the main street, a saloon at the other, and between them was everything a town needed to pretend it's civilization. They rode in mid-afternoon, both of them looking like exactly what they were. Two people who'd been through hell and come out the other side wearing it. The general store owner looked them over with the practiced assessment of someone who dealt with rough trade regularly. "You folks need supplies or trouble?" "Supplies," Rafe said. "Ammunition, food, clothing for the lady." "You got money?" Rafe put 2 gold coins on the counter. The owner's eyes widened slightly, but he had the good sense not to ask questions. "I'll get you fixed up." An hour later, they walked out with new supplies. Maylin wearing a shirt and pants that actually fit, instead of the ruined dress she'd been living in. It felt strange, masculine, freeing. She could move without fabric restricting her legs, could run if she needed to. "We should find a place to stay," Rafe said. "Real beds, hot food. Figure out what comes next." "Can we afford it?" "We can afford a few days." He looked down the street at a boarding house that advertised rooms by the week. "After that, we'll need work. Or we move on." The boarding house was run by a widow named Ellen who asked no questions and charged fair rates. She showed them to adjacent rooms on the second floor, both with windows that overlooked the street and doors that locked from the inside. "Meals are at 6 and 8, Ellen said. "You cause trouble, you leave. No exceptions." That night, Maylin sank into an actual bed for the first time in weeks and felt her body finally start to unknot. The mattress was thin and the pillow was lumpy, but it was luxury compared to sleeping on rocks with rain pouring down. She should have slept immediately. Instead, she lay awake thinking about Hales Valley, the storm, Rafe's question about regret, thinking about how far she'd come from the girl who ran from Ash Hollow with nothing but fear driving her. A knock on her door made her sit up, hand instinctively going for the knife on the nightstand. "It's me," Rafe's voice. "You awake?" She opened the door. He stood in the hallway, still dressed, expression troubled. "Can't sleep either?" she asked. "Haven't slept right in 3 years. Not about to start now." He hesitated. "Can I come in? Need to talk." She stepped back, letting him enter. He moved to the window, looking out at the street below where lamplight was starting to bloom in windows. "I've been thinking," he said, "about what we do next." "And?" "And I think you should stay here, find work, make a life. You're clear of Crow. He's not going to track you this far. And Hale's men are scattered. You've got a real shot at starting over." Maylin felt something cold settle in her stomach. "And you?" "I keep moving. There's still a bounty on my head from Hale. That doesn't go away just because he's dead. And I've made enough enemies that staying anywhere too long is stupid." "So you're leaving?" "I'm giving you a choice. You've earned it." He turned to face her. "Come with me and you're always going to be running, always looking over your shoulder. Stay here and you might actually have a future." "What if I don't want to stay?" Then you're crazier than I thought. But his voice was soft. Mei Lin, you've proven you can survive. You don't need me anymore. Maybe I need you for different reasons. The words hung between them, carrying weight she hadn't intended but couldn't take back. Rafe looked at her, really looked, and she saw something in his expression shift. That's dangerous, he said quietly. I know. I'm not someone you should get attached to. Too late. He moved closer, close enough that she could see the exhaustion carved into his face, the scars she'd never asked about, the way his hand stayed careful, even when everything else about him screamed violence. If you come with me, he said, it won't be easy, it won't be safe, and I can't promise we'll survive whatever comes next. I stopped expecting easy when I ran into the desert. She met his eyes. And I stopped caring about safe when I decided to stop being prey. You really mean that? I really do. For a moment she thought he might argue. Instead, he reached out, tucked a strand of her hair behind her ear with surprising gentleness. All right then. We'll figure it out together. But that peace lasted less than a day. Mei Lin was at the general store the next morning, buying supplies for the road, when she heard the name that had haunted her since Ash Hollow. 2 men were talking at the counter, loud enough to carry. Silas Crow's got men asking questions all over the territory. Looking for a Chinese girl, ran from a wedding arrangement. Offering money? 1,000 now. Man serious about finding her. Mei Lin's hands froze on the package she'd been examining. $1,000. Twice what Crow had paid her stepfather. Pride and anger mixed in proportions that would bankrupt most men. She finished her purchase with hands that only shook slightly, then walked back to the boarding house with her mind racing. Crow's men were asking questions all over the territory, which meant eventually, inevitably, they'd ask questions here. Rafe was in his room cleaning his guns. He looked up when she entered, took one look at her face, and set the rifle aside. What happened? She told him. Watched his expression go from concern to calculation to something harder. $1,000, he said. That's serious money. I know. Which means people will talk. Someone's going to remember a Chinese girl riding in with a man matching my description. He stood, started pacing. We need to leave. Today. Or we end it. Rafe stopped. What? Crow was not going to stop. You said it yourself. Men like him, they'd rather burn the world than let go. Mei Lin felt something crystallize inside her, a decision forming that felt both terrifying and inevitable. So we don't run. We go back. We finish it. You want to go back to Ash Hollow? To the man you nearly died escaping? I want to stop being hunted. She moved closer, made him look at her. You faced Hale. Ended 3 years of running because you knew it was the only way to be free. This is the same thing. Hale was one man in a valley. Crow owns half the territory. Then we'll be smart about it. She was surprised by how calm she sounded, how certain. You taught me to survive, to fight, to stop being prey. So let's prove it. Rafe studied her for a long moment. You understand what you're suggesting. We're talking about going after a land baron with resources and men and connections, not a quick fight, a war. I understand. And you're willing to die for this? I'm willing to live for it. There's a difference. She pulled out her mother's jade bracelet, the one piece of her past she'd kept. This belonged to my mother. She believed in America's promises, freedom, opportunity, a place where people weren't property. She died before seeing any of it come true. I'm not dying before I do. Rafe looked at the bracelet, then at Mei Lin, and something in his expression shifted. Not quite agreement, but understanding. He'd carried his own ghost for years. He knew what it was like to need closure more than safety. All right, he said finally, but we do this right. We plan it, we prepare, and we make damn sure we survive it. Because dying for freedom is noble and stupid, and I'm tired of noble getting people killed. They spent the rest of the day gathering information. The bartender knew someone who'd worked on Crow's ranch. A woman at the boarding house had a cousin in Ash Hollow. Piece by piece, they assembled a picture. Crow had expanded since Mei Lin ran. Bought out 3 smaller ranchers, hired more men, built his holdings into something that looked more like a fiefdom than a business. He was powerful, connected, and according to everyone they talk to, meaner than a snake with a stomach ache. He keeps most of his men at the main ranch, Rafe said that evening, spreading out a rough map he'd sketched. About 20, plus whoever's working cattle. The house is here, 2 stories, built like he's expecting a siege. Can we get to him? If we're stupid enough to try, yeah. Smart enough to survive it? He shook his head. That's the question. Maylin studied the map, thinking. He'll have guards, patrols, people watching. A frontal assault is suicide. Right. So we don't assault. We draw him out. How? She looked up, meeting Rafe's eyes. By giving him what he wants. Me. Absolutely not. Listen, I said no. I'm not using you as bait. Why not? It's what he's looking for. We send word I'm willing to come back, negotiate terms. He'll jump at it. Pride won't let him refuse. Rafe's jaw was tight. And when you're inside his house, surrounded by his men, with no backup and no escape route, what then? Then you get me out. She said it with more confidence than she felt. You're good at impossible. This is just one more. This is suicide with extra steps. You got a better plan. He didn't. They both knew it. After a long silence, Rafe sighed. I hate this. I know. If it goes wrong, it won't. But if it does, you run. You don't wait for me. You don't try to be heroic. You just run and keep running. Understood? Maylin wanted to argue, to say they'd both survive or neither would, but the look on Rafe's face told her he needed this promise, needed to believe he wasn't sending her to die. Understood, she said. They spent 2 more days planning, working through every detail they could anticipate and half the ones they couldn't. Rafe taught her signals, how to tell him when to move, when to wait, when to abort. They practiced until the movements were automatic, until Maylin could feel when he was watching even when she couldn't see him. On the 3rd day, they sent word to Ash Hollow. The message was simple. Maylin Zhao was willing to return and honor the arrangement with Silas Crow. Terms to be discussed in person. They waited for the response in redemption, both of them tense, knowing that every hour increased the chance someone would recognize them and claim that $1,000 bounty. The response came faster than expected. A writer arrived at the boarding house on the 4th day, carrying a letter sealed with wax. Maylin opened it with hands that wanted to shake, but didn't. The letter was brief, written in a hand that looked like it was used to giving orders. Come to Ash Hollow within the week, alone. Bring proof of identity. Any deception will be dealt with harshly. S.C. Alone, Rafe said, reading over her shoulder. He's not taking chances. Neither are we. Maylin folded the letter. When do we leave? Tonight. The longer we wait, the more time he has to prepare. Rafe was already moving, gathering their supplies. We'll get you close to town, then you go in alone. I'll follow after dark, find a position where I can see the house. And then we see what happens. He stopped, looked at her. Last chance to change your mind. We can still run. Mexico's not that far. Maylin thought about running. About spending the rest of her life looking over her shoulder, wondering when Crow's men would find her. About the girl she'd been in Ash Hollow, quiet, obedient, owned. I'm not running anymore, she said. Not from him. Not from anyone. Rafe nodded, something like pride crossing his face. Then let's go end this. They rode out of Redemption as the sun set, heading east toward Ash Hollow and whatever waited there. The desert was cooling, night air carrying the scent of sage and distant rain. Above them, stars were starting to emerge, same stars that had watched Maylin flee weeks ago. But she wasn't the same girl who'd run into the darkness on a dying horse. That girl had been prey, running from something she couldn't fight. The woman riding beside Rafe Callahan was something else entirely. And Silas Crow was about to find out exactly what. Ash Hollow looked smaller than Maylin remembered, or maybe she'd just gotten bigger. Not physically, but in the way that surviving impossible things makes you take up more space in the world. The town sat in its dusty valley like it had always been there and always would be, indifferent to the fact that she'd left it as prey and was returning as something else entirely. They stopped on a ridge overlooking the settlement as dawn broke, painting everything in shades of copper and rust. Rafe pulled out his spyglass, scanning the buildings below. Crow's ranch is on the far side. 2-story house, barn, Bunkhouse for his men. He handed her the glass. See the guards? Maylin looked. 2 men stood at the main gate, rifles visible. More would be inside, out of sight, but ready. The house itself looked exactly like what it was. A fortress disguised as a home, built by a man who understood that power made you a target. How many you think he's got? She asked. 20? Maybe 25? More than we can fight head on. Rafe took the spyglass back. Which is why we're not fighting head on. They'd gone over the plan a dozen times, but Maylin's stomach still twisted as she prepared to ride in alone. Rafe would circle around, find high ground with a sight line to the house, and wait. If things went wrong, when things went wrong, because they always did, he'd provide cover while she fought her way out. It was a terrible plan. It was also the only one they had. Give me 2 hours to get in position, Rafe said. Then ride in. Remember the signals. Maylin nodded. Her hand went to the knife at her belt, checking it was there. Rafe had wanted her to go in unarmed, said it would look more convincing. She'd refused. If she was walking into Crow's house, she was doing it with at least one way to fight back. Hey, Rafe's voice was softer than usual. You don't have to do this. We can still leave. We've had this conversation. I know, but I needed to say it again. He met her eyes. If it goes bad in there, it won't. But if it does, you prioritize getting out. Not revenge, not making a point, just survival. That's what matters. Maylin thought about her mother, who'd crossed an ocean chasing promises that turned to ash. About the girls she'd been, sold like livestock to settle debts she didn't owe. About Rosa and Martha and every other woman who'd learned that surviving meant getting hard. Survival's not enough anymore, she said. I want to live. There's a difference. Rafe looked at her for a long moment, something unreadable in his expression. Then he leaned forward and kissed her, brief, fierce, carrying weight that words couldn't hold. Don't die proving a point, he said against her mouth. I'd miss you too much. Then he was gone, riding north to circle the town, leaving Maylin alone with her pounding heart, and the knowledge that the next few hours would either free her or kill her. She waited the full 2 hours, watching the sun climb and the town wake up below. Smoke rose from chimneys. People moved through streets, starting their day like this was normal, like Maylin Zhao wasn't about to walk into the lion's den carrying nothing but anger and a plan that would get her killed. When the time came, she rode down. The guards at Crow's Gate recognized her immediately. One of them actually smiled, which made Maylin's hand itch for her knife. Well, look at this, the runaway bride came home. I'm here to see Crow. Yeah, we heard. Boss is expecting you. He opened the gate. Straight to the house. And girl, don't try anything stupid. We got orders to bring you in alive, but alive covers a lot of damage. Maylin rode through without responding. The yard was bigger than she remembered, with men working or pretending to work while they watched her pass. Their eyes carried the same assumption she'd seen in Serpent's Creek. In the saloon, everywhere men looked at women and saw property. Let them look. She was done caring what men assumed. The house loomed ahead, 2 stories of timber and stone that spoke of money and power, and a man who thought both made him untouchable. Maylin dismounted, tied her horse to the rail, and walked to the front door with her head up and her hands steady. A servant opened it before she could knock. Young Mexican girl who wouldn't meet her eyes. Senor Crow is in his study, this way. The interior was exactly what Maylin expected. Expensive furniture that no one was allowed to sit on, animal heads mounted on walls, a grandfather clock that ticked too loud. Everything carefully arranged to remind visitors that Crow had money, and they didn't. The study was at the back of the house, overlooking the ranch through windows that probably cost more than most people made in a year. And there, behind a desk made from wood too dark to be local, sat Silas Crow. He looked older than Maylin remembered, though it had only been weeks. Or maybe she was just seeing him clearly for the first time, a man in his 50s running to fat, with eyes that had gone cold from too much power and not enough challenge. He studied her with the expression of someone examining merchandise that had proven defective. Maylin Zhao, he said, you've caused me considerable trouble. That wasn't my intention. No? Then what was your intention when you stole property and fled into the desert? I was the property, and I didn't steal myself. I freed myself. There's a difference. Crow's expression hardened. You had an arrangement. Your stepfather sold you to me, fair and square. That makes you mine. People aren't things to be sold. Out here they are. He stood, walked around the desk. Maylin forced herself not to step back. You think you're the first girl to run? You think you're special? I've bought and broken a dozen like you. The only difference is you made it farther before reality caught up. Reality being you sending men to drag me back? Reality being that you have no options, no money, no family, no prospects. You're Chinese in a country that barely tolerates you. Where exactly were you planning to go? It was a fair question. A month ago, Maylin wouldn't have had an answer. Now she met his eyes and said, "Anywhere you're not." Crow's hand moved fast, backhanding her across the face hard enough that she tasted blood. The room tilted. Maylin caught herself on a chair, hand going to her knife. "Don't!" Two of Crow's men had materialized in the doorway, guns drawn. "You came here alone and unarmed. That was the deal." Maylin straightened slowly, wiping blood from her lip. The knife stayed in its sheath. "For now." "Let me make something clear," Crow said, voice dropping to something soft and dangerous. "You embarrassed me. Made me look weak to every man in 3 territories. That's not something I forgive. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to marry me like we arranged. You're going to be quiet and obedient and grateful. I'm willing to overlook your little adventure. And if you ever try to run again, I'll make sure you regret it for however long you live, which won't be long. Understood?" Maylin looked at him, really looked. Saw a man who'd built his entire identity on control, who needed to own things to prove he mattered, who would rather destroy something than admit he couldn't possess it. She'd spent 19 years around men like this. Her stepfather, the drunks in Serpent's Creek, every person who'd looked at her and seen something less than human. And she was done being afraid of them. "No," she said. Crow blinked. "Excuse me?" "I said no. I'm not marrying you. I'm not staying, and you're not making me do anything." She pulled the knife, saw the guards tense. "Because I'd rather die fighting than live as your property. You pull that knife, my men will shoot you where you stand. Probably. But I'll cut you first, and from what I've learned, that's worth it." For a moment, no one moved. The room held its breath. Then Crow laughed, the sound ugly and mean. "You really think you're going to fight your way out? One girl against 20 armed men?" He gestured to his guards. "Take the knife. Don't kill her. Just make sure she understands consequences." The men moved forward. Maylin backed toward the window, knife up, mathematics running through her head. 2 men, both armed, both bigger than her. No cover. No backup yet. Rafe would still be getting into position. She was going to die here. The thought was strangely freeing. If she was dying anyway, she might as well make it count. The first guard reached for her. Maylin slashed at his hand, opened a red line across his palm. He cursed, jerked back. The second guard tried to grab her from behind. She drove her elbow into his throat, heard him choke. Then Crow was there, moving faster than a fat man should, grabbing her wrist and twisting until the knife clattered to the floor. His other hand closed around her throat. "Stupid girl," he hissed. "You could have had an easy life. Now you get to learn what happens to property that breaks." Maylin's vision was graying. She clawed at his hand, couldn't get purchase. Her lungs screamed. The room started spinning. Then glass exploded inward, and Crow stumbled back, releasing her. Maylin fell, gasping, and saw the neat hole in the window. Heard the distant crack of a rifle shot. Rafe. Crow was clutching his shoulder, blood seeping between his fingers, his face twisted in rage and shock. "What?" Another shot. The guard nearest the window went down. The other one dove for cover, returning fire blindly. Maylin grabbed her knife and ran. She made it to the door before more guards poured in, blocking her path. She reversed, headed for the broken window, glass crunching under her boots. Behind her, Crow was shouting orders, voice cutting through the chaos. "Lock the house down. Find the shooter, and someone grab that girl before she—" Maylin didn't hear the rest. She was through the window, dropping into bushes that tore at her clothes, rolling to her feet and running for the barn where her horse was tied. Gunfire erupted behind her, Rafe providing cover, bullets forcing Crow's men to stay inside. She made it to the horse, cut the reins with her knife, and swung into the saddle just as men burst from the bunkhouse. They were shouting, confused, trying to figure out where the shots were coming from. Maylin didn't give them time to organize. She kicked the plow horse into a gallop, heading for the gate. A guard stepped in front of her, rifle raised. Maylin leaned low in the saddle, heard the shot pass close enough to feel the wind. Then she was past him, through the gate, onto open ground. More gunfire behind her. She risked a glance back, saw men mounting horses, starting pursuit. At least 6, maybe more. Too many to outrun on a horse that was built for steady, not fast. A distant crack, and one of the pursuers went down. Another shot. Another man fallen. Rafe was picking them off, buying her distance. But he couldn't get them all, and eventually they'd locate him. Mei Lin rode hard toward the ridge where they'd watched the town at dawn. The plan had been to regroup there if things went bad. Things had gone very bad. She just hoped Rafe could disengage and make it out. The plow horse was flagging, foam on her neck, breathing labored. Mei Lin urged her on anyway, hating herself for it, but needing the distance more than kindness. Behind her, the pursuit was closing. 4 riders now, the others presumably dead or smart enough to give up. She made it to the ridge, dismounted, and took position behind rocks with a rifle. The horse stood heaving beside her, too exhausted to run farther. Mei Lin chambered around and waited. The riders came on hard, spreading out as they approached. Professional. They knew what they were doing. Mei Lin sighted on the lead rider, breathed out, squeezed. The rifle kicked. The man jerked in his saddle but didn't fall. She'd hit him, just not well enough. She worked the bolt, fired again. This time he went down. The others scattered, taking cover. Return fire kicked up dirt near Mei Lin's position. She ducked, relocated, came up firing from a different angle. Another man down. 2 left. They were working together now, one providing cover while the other advanced. Mei Lin tried to track them, couldn't get a clear shot. She was running out of ammunition, out of time, out of luck. Then Rafe was there, appearing from nowhere with his rifle, dropping one pursuer before they knew he'd arrived. The last man turned to run. Rafe shot him in the back. Silence fell, broken only by the plow horse's labored breathing and Mei Lin's hammering heart. Rafe moved to her position, checking her over with quick efficiency. "You hurt?" "Crow hit me, otherwise fine." "Can you ride?" "Yes." "Then we go. Now, before reinforcements arrive." They rode north, pushing the horses as hard as they dared, putting distance between them and Ash Hollow. Behind them, smoke was rising. Something was burning. Mei Lin didn't know what and didn't care. All that mattered was forward, away, free. They rode until the horses were stumbling, then made camp in a canyon that offered protection from 3 sides. Rafe built a minimal fire while Mei Lin tended the animals, feeling the adrenaline finally drain away. "That went about as badly as it could have," Rafe said, handing her coffee that tasted like it had been made from dirt and anger. "We're alive. I'd call that a win. We're alive and every man in Crow's employ is going to be hunting us. That's not a win. It's a delay." Mei Lin sipped the terrible coffee. "So what do we do?" "We finish it." Rafe's expression was grim. "Crow's wounded but not dead. Angry and probably scared, which makes him dangerous. He'll send everyone he has after us." "Let him. I'm tired of running." "Me too." Rafe pulled out his rifle, started cleaning it. "But there's a difference between standing your ground and suicide. We need an advantage." "Like what?" "Like turning his own people against him." Rafe looked up. "Crow rules through fear, but fear only works when people believe you're untouchable. We just proved he's not. Put a bullet in him in his own house, made him bleed." Understanding dawned. "You want to undermine him?" "I want to destroy him. Not just kill him, end everything he's built. Make sure when he dies, his empire dies with him." Rafe set the rifle aside. "And I know how to do it." Over the next week, they became ghosts. They'd hit one of Crow's smaller properties, a line shack where he ran cattle, and free the workers he kept there in conditions that bordered on slavery. They'd intercept supply wagons, take the goods, and distribute them to the Chinese workers in Ash Hollow who were barely surviving. They'd spread word that Crow had been wounded, was weak, was losing control. Each action was small. Together, they started an avalanche. Workers began leaving. Suppliers stopped extending credit. Other ranchers who'd been intimidated into compliance suddenly found their courage. The empire Crow had built on fear and violence started crumbling at the edges. And all the while, Mei Lin and Rafe stayed just ahead of his hunters, never in one place long enough to be caught, always visible enough to remind everyone that Silas Crow couldn't protect himself, much less them. On the 8th day, they got word that Crow had left Ash Hollow. He was traveling with only 4 men, heading for a property he owned near the Mexican border, running, essentially, from the chaos his own cruelty had created. "This is it," Rafe said. "He's isolated, vulnerable. We end it now." They tracked him to a ranch house that looked more like a bunker, surrounded by open ground that made approach nearly impossible. But Mei Lin had learned a lot in the weeks since leaving Ash Hollow the first time. And one of the things she'd learned was that impossible just meant you hadn't found the angle yet. They waited until night, then approached on foot, leaving the horses a mile back. The ranch house had guards, but they were watching for riders, not for 2 people crawling through tall grass like snakes. It took an hour to get close, another hour to position themselves where they could see into the house through windows that glowed with lamplight. And there, visible through the glass, was Silas Crow. He looked diminished. The shoulder wound had left him favoring one side, and the confidence that had defined him was gone, replaced by the hunted look of a man who knew his time was running out. "I can take the shot from here," Rafe whispered. "End it clean." Mei Lin shook her head. "No, I need to face him. That's stupid and dangerous. I know, but I need him to see me. Need him to know that I'm the reason he lost everything." She looked at Rafe. "Trust me." He didn't like it, but after a moment, he nodded. They split up. Rafe took position with a sight line on the house. Mei Lin circled to the back door, the one the servants would use, the one guards might overlook. It was unlocked. Careless. Mei Lin slipped inside, knife in one hand, rifle in the other, moving through the kitchen like a shadow. She could hear voices from the main room, Crow and his remaining men, discussing their next move. "Mexico," Crow was saying. "We can rebuild there, start over." "With what money?" "The bank called in your loans." "Then we'll rob the bank. I'm not losing everything because one Chinese whore decided to grow a spine." Mei Lin stepped into the room. 4 men, all armed, all turning to stare at her like she'd materialized from thin air. "Hello, Silas," she said. Crow's face went through several emotions in quick succession: shock, fear, rage, settling on rage because it was familiar. "You? How did you get in?" "Walked through the back door. You should really lock those." She kept her rifle trained on him. "We need to talk." "There's nothing to talk about. You're dead. You and whoever's been helping you." "Maybe, but you first." Mei Lin moved farther into the room, putting a table between her and the guards. "See, I've been thinking about what you said, about how people like me have no options, no prospects, how we're just property to be bought and sold. That's how the world works. No, that's how you want the world to work, because it gives you power." She smiled without warmth. "But I learned something. Power isn't given. It's taken. And I'm here to take yours." Crow's hand moved toward his gun. Mei Lin shot him. Not to kill. She put the bullet through his other shoulder, matching the wound Rafe had given him. Crow screamed, fell back against his chair. His men drew their weapons. "Move and I drop you!" Rafe's voice came from the doorway, rifle trained. "Your choice. 3 against 2. Bad odds." But the men looked at Crow bleeding in his chair, looked at Mei Lin standing over him with death in her eyes, and apparently decided this wasn't their fight anymore. "We're leaving," one of them said. "This is between you and him." They walked out. Mei Lin heard horses moments later, hoofbeats fading into distance. Crow was trying to stop the bleeding, failing. "You can't do this. I'm important. People will come looking. Let them look." Mei Lin pulled up a chair, sat across from him. "I want you to understand something. You didn't lose because I got lucky. You lost because you thought owning people made you strong. But the moment they stop being afraid, you have nothing. I gave you a life. You gave me a cage." She leaned forward. "My mother crossed an ocean believing in promises, freedom, opportunity, a place where people were more than their circumstances. She died before seeing any of it, but I won't. I'm going to live free, and you're going to die knowing you couldn't stop me." "You're a murderer," Crow gasped. "No, I'm someone who learned to fight back." Mei Lin stood. "There's a difference." She walked to the door where Rafe was waiting. Behind her, Crow was calling out. Threats, pleas, promises. She didn't turn around. "You're not going to finish it?" Rafe asked quietly. "I already did. He's bleeding out, alone, with everything he built destroyed. That's enough." They walked out together, leaving Silas Crow to the darkness and his failing empire. By the time they rode away, the house was burning. Maylin didn't know if Crow's men had done it or if a lamp had tipped over. She didn't particularly care. The important thing was watching the flames climb into the night sky, turning everything Crow had built into ash and memory. "Where to now?" Rafe asked as they rode. Maylin thought about it. About all the places she'd been, all the running, all the choices that had brought her from Ash Hollow to here. She thought about her mother's bracelet still wrapped in cloth in her satchel, about promises that America had made and broken and maybe, possibly, could still keep. "Somewhere we can build something," she said. "Something that's ours." "That's pretty vague." "I know, but we've got time to figure it out." They rode through the night and into dawn, heading west toward country neither of them knew. Behind them, the past was burning. Ahead, the future was uncertain, but uncertainty, Maylin had learned, was just another word for possibility. And she'd become very good at making possibilities work. 3 months later, they found land near a town called Silver Creek. It wasn't much: rocky soil, stubborn brush, a stream that ran dry 3 months a year. But it was theirs, bought with what was left of Hale's gold, registered under both their names, a piece of earth that answered to no one. They built a house. Small at first, one room with a fireplace and a door that locked from the inside. Rafe taught Maylin to hunt, track, read the land like a language. She taught him to cook rice properly, to write in characters that looked like art, to believe that surviving didn't have to be the only goal. The town was wary at first. Chinese woman and a wanted man setting up together raised questions. But Maylin had learned to stand tall, to meet eyes directly, to make it clear she wasn't asking permission to exist. And Rafe had learned that walking away from violence was harder than starting it, but more worth it. They worked the land, raised cattle that were too stubborn to die, and crops that shouldn't have grown but did anyway. Made friends slowly with neighbors who learned that judging people by their past was less useful than judging them by their present. Sometimes bounty hunters came looking for Rafe. The first time, Maylin stood beside him with her rifle and made it clear they'd have to go through her. After that, word spread. Callahan had someone watching his back now, someone who could shoot straight and wasn't afraid to prove it. On a summer evening a year after they'd settled, Maylin was working in the garden when Rafe came out with a letter. "Mail came," he said. She wiped dirt from her hands. "From who?" "Rosa, the woman who ran the way station." He handed it over. Maylin opened it, read the neat handwriting. Rosa had heard about what happened with Crow, wanted Maylin to know that stories were spreading, about a Chinese girl who'd refused to be property, about how she'd taken down a land baron and walked away free. "You're becoming a legend," Rafe said, reading over her shoulder. "That's ridiculous." "Is it? You did something most people wouldn't dare. Fought back when fighting back meant probable death. Won when winning should have been impossible." He paused. "That's exactly what legends are made of." Maylin thought about the girl she'd been, quiet, obedient, convinced that survival meant accepting whatever life handed you. That girl was gone, burned away by desert sun and violence, and the slow understanding that freedom wasn't a gift. It was something you claimed, defended, and built day by day. "I don't want to be a legend," she said. "I just want to live." "Then live." Rafe gestured at the land around them, rough, difficult, beautiful in its refusal to be anything other than what it was. "We earned this, every acre, every moment. No one can take it from us." "People always try to take things." "Let them try." His hand found hers. "We'll be ready." And they were. When drought came, they survived it. When neighbors needed help, they gave it. When the past came calling, because it always did, in the form of men who thought old debts still mattered, they faced it together and sent it away disappointed. Years passed. The house grew larger, room by room. The land proved more generous than it first appeared. Maylin learned that strength wasn't about never being afraid. It was about acting despite fear. Rafe learned that survival was hollow without something worth surviving for. They never married. The institution felt too much like ownership, like the cage Maylin had fought so hard to escape. But they built a life that meant more than any ceremony, a partnership of equals who'd chosen each other not because they had to, but because they wanted to. On a winter night 20 years after Ash Hollow, Maylin sat on the porch of their house, wrapped in a blanket, watching snow fall. Rafe was inside. fixing something that didn't need fixing because his hands needed to stay busy. She pulled out her mother's jade bracelet, the one constant through all the changes. It looked the same as it had that first night, fleeing into darkness with nothing but hope and desperation. But Mei Lin had changed. The girl who wore this bracelet once was someone else entirely, someone who believed freedom was something given by others, who thought survival meant acceptance, who didn't understand that the only person who could truly own you was yourself. That girl had died in the desert. Or maybe she'd been born there. It was hard to tell the difference sometimes. Rafe came out, sat beside her. "You're thinking loud. Just remembering." "Good memories or bad?" "Both. Which I guess makes them honest." She handed him the bracelet. "My mother gave me this. Told me it would protect me." "Did it?" "No. But I protected myself. That's better." Rafe examined the bracelet, then handed it back. "You think she'd be proud? Your mother?" Mei Lin considered. Her mother had wanted her to be safe, respectable, the kind of daughter who didn't cause trouble. Instead, she'd become a woman who'd killed men, burned empires, and built a life on her own terms. "I think she'd be terrified," Mei Lin said honestly. "But maybe, eventually, proud, because I lived free." That's what she wanted, even if the path there wasn't what she imagined. "Freedom's messy," Rafe agreed. "Never looks like the stories say it should." "No, it looks like hard work and difficult choices and learning that safety is a myth." "You regret any of it?" Mei Lin thought about that. About the violence, the fear, the moments when death seemed certain. About the girl who died in the desert and the woman who'd emerged. About every hard choice that had brought her here, to this porch, to this life, to this moment of peace earned through years of refusing to stay down. "I regret the people who died," she said. "The ones who got caught in the crossfire. But the rest? The running, the fighting, the becoming someone I didn't recognize?" She shook her head. "No, because staying who I was would have killed me slower, and I'm done dying for other people's comfort." Rafe was quiet for a moment. Then, "You know what I think?" "What?" "I think you're the bravest person I've ever met, and I've met a lot of people who thought they were brave. Brave is just another word for too stubborn to quit. Same thing usually." He stood, held out his hand. "Come inside, it's cold, and I made something that might be food if we're generous with definitions." Mei Lin took his hand, let him pull her up. Inside the house was warm, filled with the smell of whatever Rafe had cooked, and the quiet comfort of a space they'd built together. This was freedom, she thought, not the absence of threats or the guarantee of safety. Just the simple fact of choosing your own path and defending it against anyone who said you couldn't. And if that path was messy, violent, harder than it should be, well, nothing worth having came easy. The desert had taught her that. Crow had taught her that. Every mile between Ash Hollow and here had taught her that. You didn't get free by asking permission. You got free by taking it, holding it, and refusing to let go no matter what the cost. And Mei Lin Zhao, once property, once prey, once a girl who thought survival meant acceptance, she'd learned that lesson better than most. She was free. She'd fought for it, bled for it, became someone new for it, and she'd die before giving it up. But tonight, there was no dying, just living. Just the warmth of the fire and Rafe's terrible cooking and the sound of snow falling on land that belonged to them and no one else. Just freedom, messy and hard-won and more precious than jade. Just life, chosen and defended and built one day at a time. And that, Mei Lin thought as she sat down to eat, was enough. More than enough. It was everything.